The wind in the Medicine Bow Mountains doesn't just blow. It screams. It's a lonely, high-pitched wail that finds every crack in a man's cabin and every crack in his soul. Silas Thorne had lived with that sound for 15 years. He preferred it to the sound of human voices. Voices lied. Voices broke promises. The wind just told the truth, that the world was cold and you were alone in it. Silas was a big man, built like a ridge of granite, with hands that spent too many years holding a rifle and not enough years holding anything soft. He was sitting by the hearth, the amber light of the fire dancing off the scars on his knuckles, whittling a piece of cedar into a useless shape. He wasn't making anything. He was just killing time before time eventually killed him. Then the sound came. It wasn't the wind. It was a heavy, wet thud against his heavy oak door. Then a scrape, like fingernails on stone. Silas didn't move at first. Out here, a knock at the door usually meant one of two things: a man looking to kill you or a man looking to die. He set the cedar down, his hand moving with a practiced, liquid grace to the Winchester leaning against the wall. He didn't chamber around. Not yet. The click of a lever was a question you couldn't take back. He pulled the door open. The cold hit him first, a wall of white frost that stole the breath from his lungs. Then she fell. She didn't collapse so much as she folded, like a bird with a broken wing. She was wearing a dress that might have been yellow once, now stained the color of rusted iron and trailed dust. She was barefoot. Her feet were a mess of blue-black bruises and open sores. But it was her shoulder that caught the firelight. A feathered shaft of dark ash was buried deep in the meat of her collarbone. It was an old-style arrow, the kind used by the renegades who haunted the high passes. The wound was angry, purple, weeping into the fabric of her dress. Silas dropped the rifle and caught her before her face hit the floorboards. She was shivering so hard he could hear her teeth rattling. She smelled of pine resin, sweat, and the metallic tang of fresh blood. He lifted her. She weighed almost nothing, just skin and bone and secrets, and laid her on his workbench. The light from the oil lamp swung overhead, casting long, jagged shadows across her face. She was young, far too young for the look of absolute exhaustion in her eyes. She gripped his forearm. Her fingers were ice, but her grip was like a vice. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy with fever. She looked at the arrow, then up at Silas. "It's too deep," she sobbed, her voice a dry rattle. Please pull out." Silas looked at the wound. His stomach did a slow roll. He'd seen a lot of things in the war. He'd seen what a mini ball does to a man's leg. He'd seen what a saber does to a face. But this was different. The arrow was deep, angled down toward the lung. "If I pull it, you might bleed out before I can stop it," Silas said. His voice was like grinding gravel. He hadn't spoken in 3 days. "Please," she choked out, a single tear cutting a clean path through the dirt on her cheek. "It's not just the pain. It's what's inside. It's heavy. Pull it out." Silas reached for his hunting knife. He threw a handful of salt into the fire, a habit from a life he tried to forget. He heated the blade until it glowed a dull, angry red. He took a swig of rye whiskey, poured the rest over the wound, and watched her back arch as the alcohol bit into her. She didn't scream. She just gasped a sharp, broken sound. "Hold on to the table," Silas commanded. He gripped the shaft of the arrow with his left hand. He felt the girl's body go rigid. He began to cut, widening the entry point just enough to clear the barbs. But as the blade moved, he felt something strange. The knife didn't just hit bone. It hit something hard, something that didn't belong in a human body. He braced his feet. With one steady, powerful surge, he pulled. The arrow came free with a wet, sickening pop. The girl slumped into unconsciousness instantly. Silas moved fast, pressing a clean wad of linen into hole to stem the crimson tide. But as he went to toss the arrow into the scrap pile, he stopped. The arrow felt wrong. It was too heavy. The shaft was thick, thicker than any hunting arrow Silas had ever seen. He held it up to the lamp. The wood had been hollowed out. A plug of beeswax sealed the end near the fletching. Silas used his knife to scrape away the wax. He tipped the hollow shaft over his palm. He expected a message, a note, a map, What fell out was a stream of heavy, glittering dust and 3 small, jagged nuggets. Gold. Raw. High-grade California gold. The girl wasn't just a victim. She was a courier. She was carrying a fortune inside her own flesh. Silas stared at the gold in his palm. It felt hot, dangerous. He looked at the girl. Her face pale as a ghost under a flickering lamp. She had run miles with a hollowed-out arrow filled with gold buried in her shoulder. Who was she running from? And more importantly, what kind of people use a woman's body as a treasure chest? He spent the next hour stitching the wound. His hands, usually so clumsy with anything small, moved with a strange tenderness. He cleaned her feet. He wrapped her in a heavy buffalo robe and moved her to the cot by the fire. He sat in his chair, the Winchester across his lap, watching the door. The gold sat on the table between them, a small pile of sunlight in a room full of shadows. He thought about the war. He thought about Tennessee. He thought about the daughter he'd buried under a willow tree 20 years ago. He'd sworn he was done with the world's problems. He'd moved to these mountains to be a ghost among ghosts. But as he looked at the girl, he felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. The night wore on. The fire died down to red embers. Around 3 a.m., the wind died down, and in the sudden, deafening silence, Silas heard it. The sound of horses. 3 of them, maybe 4. They were moving slowly, coming up the ridge road. They weren't trying to hide, but they weren't in a hurry either. That was the sound of men who knew their prey had nowhere left to run. Silas stood up. His joints popped like dry kindling. He looked at the girl. She was still under, her breathing shallow but steady. He looked at the gold. He picked it up and shoved it into his pocket. If you're still here, listening to this story, then you're a lot like Silas. You know that out here, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. You know that the real storm is rarely the one made of snow. If you want to see if Silas survives the night, and if the girl ever tells her real name, now is the time to hit that subscribe button. We got a lot more trail to cover, and you won't want to miss what's coming over the next ridge. Give this story a like if you believe some things are worth fighting for. Silas stepped out onto the porch. The air was so cold it felt like it was trying to turn his eyes to ice. He didn't take the rifle. He took the shotgun, a double-barrel greener. At this range, in this light, he didn't need accuracy. He needed a wall of lead. The riders emerged from the tree line. They looked like shadows stitched together from old rags and hate. They stopped 20 yards from the cabin. The man in the lead was wearing a duster that dragged in the snow. He had a face like a dried-up creek bed and eyes that didn't reflect the moonlight. He sat on his horse with the easy arrogance of a man who had never been told no. Thorne, the man called out. His voice was a thin, oily rasp. I see you got a guess. The mountains are free for anyone who can survive them, Miller, Silas replied. He recognized the voice. Jedidiah Miller, a man who had been a scout for the Union, until he found out there was more money in killing for himself. She's got something of mine, Miller said. He nudged his horse a step closer. Under her skin. I put it there. I'd like it back. She's a human being, Miller, not a leather pouch. Miller laughed. It was a dry, rattling sound that reminded Silas of the rattlesnake he'd killed in his woodpile last summer. She's a thief. She took a detour she wasn't supposed to take. Now, you can step aside and let us do our work, or you can join her in the permafrost. I don't much care which. The 2 men behind Miller shifted in their saddles. Their hands were resting on the pommels of their revolvers. They were young, eager, the kind of boys who thought a gun made them men. Silas had buried plenty of boys like them. I spent 4 years in the trenches at Petersburg, Silas said softly. I've seen death when it was hungry, Miller. You don't scare me. You just annoy me. Silas didn't wait for Miller to draw. He leveled the greener and fired the first barrel into the air. The roar was deafening. A physical blow that sent the horses into a panic frenzy. The next one goes into the lead horse. Silas yelled over the echoes. Turn around. Now. Miller struggled to control his mount. His face was twisted in a mask of pure rage. You're an old man, Thorne. You can't watch that door forever. We'll wait. will burn you out. Then you better start a fire, Silas said, because it's a long night and I've got plenty of shells. Miller looked at the cabin, then at the shotgun, then at the dark woods behind him. He knew Silas. He knew the man didn't bluff. With a curse that could have curdled milk, he jerked his horse around. This ain't over. Miller screamed. You hear me? It ain't over. Silas watched them ride back into the darkness. He didn't move until the sound of the hooves had completely vanished. Then he went back inside and barred the door. The girl was awake. She was propped up on one elbow, staring at him. Her eyes were clear now, though she was still deathly pale. She looked at the shotgun, then at the empty space on the table where the gold had been. They're gone, Silas said. He sat back down in his chair. For now, she whispered. He'll come back. He always comes back. He's the one who made the arrows. Silas pulled the gold nuggets from his pocket and set them on the table. Why? The girl looked at the gold with a mixture of loathing and sorrow. It's a tribute. Miller runs a mining camp over the ridge. He steals a high grade, or before the company can log it. He uses us, girls from the town, to carry it out past the inspectors. He sews it in. He shoots it in. He says if we run, the property stays in the vault. Silas felt a coldness in his chest that had nothing to do with the Wyoming winter. My name is Elara, she said, and I didn't steal it. I just want to be free of it. Silas nodded. He didn't ask for anything else. He didn't need to. He knew the story. It was the same story the West had been telling since the first man put a fence around a piece of dirt. For the next week, the cabin was a fortress. Silas didn't sleep for more than 2 hours at a time. He sat by the window, his rifle resting on the sill. Elara grew stronger. She helped him around the cabin. She cooked a stew that actually had flavor, a luxury Silas hadn't known in years. They didn't talk much. In the West, silence is a sign of respect. It means you trust the other person enough to let them keep their own thoughts. One evening, as the sun was dipping below the peaks, painting the snow in shades of violet and gold, Elara sat across from him. You could have handed me over, she said. You could have kept the gold for yourself. Why didn't you? Silas looked out the window. He saw the shadows of the pines stretching long across the clearing. I had a daughter once, Silas said. It was the first time he'd said it out loud in 2 decades. She would have been about your age. She didn't get a chance to run. I figured, maybe if I help you, the scales might balance out a little. Just a little. Elara reached across the table and touched his hand. Her skin was warm now. What do we do when the snow melts? She asked. Silas looked at the Winchester. We go to the sheriff in Laramie. We give him the gold. We give him the arrow. And I make sure you get where you're going. And what about you? Silas smiled. It was a small, tiring thing. I think I'm done being a ghost. Elara, I think I'd like to see what the world looks like when the wind stops screaming. But the world doesn't always let you go that easy. The next morning, the sun rose in a different kind of silence. Silas stepped out to get wood, and he saw it, a single arrow, fletched with black feathers, quivering in the center of his door. There was no gold in this one, just a note wrapped around the shaft. Sunrise at the bridge. Bring the girl and the oar, or the cabin burns with both of you inside. Silas didn't show the note to Elara. He just sharpened his knife. He cleaned his rifle. He put on his old coat, the one with the faded sergeant's stripes on the sleeve. He knew this wasn't just about gold anymore. It was about the things a man carries. Some men carry greed. Some men carry lead. Silas Thorne carried a memory, and he was finally ready to lay it to rest. As Silas stepped into morning light, he didn't look like a lonely rancher anymore. He looked like a storm. We're going to leave Silas and Elara there for now at the edge of the woods, facing a choice that will change everything. If this story touched you, if you've ever had to pull an arrow out of your own past, let us know in the comments. Where are you listening from today? We love hearing your voices in the dark. And if you want to know what happens at that bridge, if you want to see if Jedidiah Miller finally meets the justice he's been outrunning, then you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and stick around. Because out here in the West, the story is just getting started. Pour yourself another cup of coffee. Stay warm. We'll see you on the next trail.